and welcome back to this 8th, I think, video in this Managing Stress Q&A series. This is where I'm answering some questions from readers that they have emailed into me from my email subscribers. So if you have a question you'd like to submit to this series, go to aliceboys.com and sign up to my email list, and you can just reply with your question about managing stress to any of the emails that you get. Alright, so let's see what we've got today. I hope everyone who's watching this straight away had a happy Thanksgiving weekend. It was my first Thanksgiving as an American citizen. I got my US citizenship right at the end of last year, so that was pretty exciting for me. Alright, so let's look at the questions for today. Alright, this is from Margot. Margot says, "Hi Alice, I'm interested to know how to work with bullying behaviour from a colleague. The colleague has very high standards, works incredibly hard, and finds fault with absolutely everyone. She cannot see other ways of working and creates mayhem as our work is heavily dependent on teamwork. I'm paid to work 5 days a week, 9 to 5, but I have actually worked every day for 11 to 15 hours with no breaks for the last 2 to 3 months." Alright, so I will confess that I am one of those people who is a perfectionist, and my perfectionism makes me incredibly hard to work with in some respects. So I get really fussy about things. So I think I understand this from the perspective of the person who's being super annoying. And I have an article on HBR, on Harvard Business Review site, on how to collaborate with the perfectionist. It's an old one. I can't remember quite what I wrote in it, but there might be some tips in it that are useful to you. So if you go to hbr.org and I think it's .org, Harvard Business Review website, and search for my name, it should come up, or search for how to collaborate with a perfectionist. Now, whenever I get questions about how to handle a situation with someone else, like how to influence someone else's behavior, the default principle that I always use is you need to handle the situation in a way that you feel satisfied with how you handled it, regardless of what impact you have on the other person's behavior, right? So we can't change anyone else, we can only change ourselves. So you need to be happy with the way that you're handling it. The way you handle it needs to feel authentic to your values, and it needs to feel right to you. You need to feel satisfied that with the actions that you take to handle it, regardless of how the other person reacts and whether they change at all. So one of the things you can do is to pick 3 to 5 values, right? That are things that feel really important to you. So it could be things like bravery, reliability, discipline, helpfulness, positivity. It could be anything that feels like a value to you. So pick either 3 or 5 top values, right? And see which of those values seems to correspond the most to this situation. Now, if you get stuck on identifying your values, there's a quiz from author Susan David, who wrote a book called Emotional Agility, or I think the book's called Emotional Agility. It's about the concept of emotional agility, and she has a free quiz on her website, and one of the questions is about identifying your values, and in the context of doing that, she'll offer you a big list of values to choose from. So if you want to use that as inspiration, and once you, the reason I'm saying 5, that's kind of too many to try and apply to the situation, but not every value is that applicable to a specific situation. So you might identify even just 1 or 2 where you want to handle the situation from the perspective of that value. And that's a way that you can make the way you're handling the situation feel more satisfying and more authentic to you. Maybe fairness is a value, or bravery is a value, or empathy is a value, or whatever it is. Now, and then think, how can I apply that value to how I handle this situation? Now, as somebody that is on the other side of this and is someone that gets kind of really fussy and really annoying, and other people feel like they're working excessively hard when they work with me, right? So not everybody, but like in some situations, like when something's really important to me, and when I'm trying or when I'm anxious about something, then I get extra perfectionistic and extra fussy. And the more important it is, and the more anxious I get, or whatever it is, and if it's new or whatever, then the more kind of fussy I get, and the more that tends to impact other people. So one of the things is to try and explain, to try and understand the perspective of this other person. Like what is it that's motivating this other person to be super fussy, or what is making them making them send emails at all sorts of out of hours times, or so maybe somebody maybe there's a big difference between people that have some insight into their behaviour and people that don't. So part of how you handle it will depend on whether the person does or doesn't have some insight into part of the reaction you'll get will depend on that. But sometimes, for example, somebody knows, like, I shouldn't be messaging this person on a weekend, but like maybe they noticed a message too late, or maybe they're just anxious about how something is going to turn out, and their anxiety causes them to send that reply after hours, or send that reply on a weekend, or to approach something in a super fussy way, even though they know better, even though they're thinking, oh, like, I really shouldn't be bugging this person after hours, or it's like, it's a quarter of an hour before we're supposed to all go home, I should leave this, or I know this is this is being, the person might know this is being extra fussy, but there's something that's provoking their anxiety that's making them do that thing that's extra fussy. So if the person has some insight into their behaviour, but that's happening anyway, then you can kind of work with that. I think sometimes, like, I've definitely had the feedback before that other people find me intimidating when again, this is like not in every situation, but it's just in some situations where something feels really high stakes to me, and it activates my anxiety, and so I will come across in a way that's intimidating to others, and I don't mean it, and it's usually like rather than me feeling superior to others, it's me feeling inferior to others, but it comes across in a way, I wouldn't say bullying, but it certainly comes across in a way that's sort of intense. So if someone has that insight, and if you can tap into what is making them what the underlying motivation is for why they're being extra fussy, then you can kind of work with that. Another thing in identifying how you can handle someone is to think that there are some people who react really well to messages of acceptance, and there are some people who really react really well to messages of autonomy, right? So one thing is to figure out whether the person you're working with wants their autonomy to be reinforced, like wants to be told, I'm sure you're going to make a good decision, and the ball sort of pushed back into their court, or whether they really need acceptance. So sometimes people who act in these ways that you're sort of describing is someone that desperately wants acceptance, but doesn't feel that from a team or a group, but doesn't feel like that's ever achievable, because they maybe feel like there's no way it's not in their repertoire of behaviours to get to behave in a way that's going to be going to cause them to be liked and accepted by their group. So sometimes you can use a strategy of reinforcing, hey, we're a tight team, we're going to get through this together, type of thing. And I know that sounds like it would be a really hard message to give in this situation, but you want to try to figure out which of those two approaches that person will respond to better. And a lot of it comes down to the person's attachment style. So it's kind of like too much to go into that now. There is a chapter on that in Healthy Mind Toolkit, but you can try those things. In terms of like practical stuff, I would set your own boundaries. So as part of approaching the situation from values that are important to you, use that to set your own boundaries, right? So that you're not getting sucked into the other person's behavior, because it can really become a cycle. Like you develop a cycle with someone of contacting them after hours, or having like a lot of back and forth on things, and especially if the person's behavior comes from insecurity, they might actually respond really well to some boundaries being placed on them. Like for me, as I said, being the person that is the one being annoying in these kinds of situations, sometimes I actually do respond well to people putting boundaries on me, if they do it in a way that also conveys a lot of acceptance. Like if it's hey, we really like working with you, but can we make sure that we just do communication in this specific way? Like it would make things flow better if we did it like this. We really value like the ideas that you bring, and we really value working with you, and we like you a lot, but please can we do the communication this way to be a bit more efficient? So those kinds of boundaries can actually go down well with somebody who is acting demanding out of anxiety. And again, I don't know if that's the case with this person, and that's why I say like these questions are really hard for me to answer, because they're about changing someone else where I know like nothing about the other person basically. So the overarching message with everything like this is to approach it from the perspective of your own values, so that you feel satisfied with how you're handling it, regardless of the impact that it has on the other person. I will leave that there. And you can use Susan David's list of values. And if you have a value that something you think of a value isn't on that list, you can add your own, right? But it'll give you the idea of what they mean by values. All right. Okay, so this next one's from Barbie, who says, I took a pay cut and I'm so stressed about my job security that I'm struggling to feel motivated and creative. Yet I've also been asked to reinvigorate my practice area within a struggling industry. How do I find energy to keep going and feel creative and be creative while feeling an immense amount of stress to feed my team and my family? Okay, and this person says, see my first statement, and her first statement was, I tend to overthink and hesitate, and I'm a recovering perfectionist on top of ADHD. Okay, so I think in terms of creativity, the one thing that you can do is, when you're struggling to be creative, like on demand, is to work on creativity in fields that are unrelated to your field. Like I find doing drawing with my 4-year-old helps me get into helps me infuse my life with creativity, right? So she has lots of creative interests that have never been creative interests of mine. Like I was never someone that did a lot of crafting or a lot of drawing or those kinds of things, even as a kid. So she is kind of drawing me into those interests. One of the ways to sort of refresh your creativity is to infuse your life with creativity in a bunch of different ways. Like coming up to Christmas, it could be like doing some creative Christmas cards, or it could be one of the things that my mother did when I was a kid was she got someone to paint a mural of our family on a fence in our house, in our yard. And like she had no skills to paint the mural, but she had the vision. Like she found photographs of each of us, like in clothes that we typically wore, things that kind of were really reflective of us, and she hired someone to paint the mural. So what I would say is find many little small ways to infuse your life with creativity. What else? The other thing I would say is make sure that you So creativity is a lot about incubation. It's a lot about using our default network. So your default network is the mode that your mind goes into when it sort of drifts off, like where you will drift off into thinking about work while you're going for a walk, or when you're driving somewhere, or while you're exercising, or all of those kinds of things. That, or in the shower, right, is the great stereotypical example. And what you need to do is to make sure that you recognize that you need those times and count them as work. So there's a lot of over focus, I think, on discipline and focus, right? On let's all be disciplined and focused, and let's do less Twitter and less email and all of that kind of thing. But you actually need, as much as you need to cultivate focus, you need to cultivate having that mental downtime where it's okay for you to let your mind drift and let like things that are loosely connected connect up to each other in your mind. So this idea is, creativity is things that connecting things that haven't been connected. So you have to allow yourself to have the time for those connections to pop up, and that happens when your brain is in the default network. It happens when you're doing other things, not when you are focusing on work. Well, it often happens that way. And that's why, like brainstorming sessions and stuff aren't always that useful, right? Because that's not the mode. It's often not the mode that we're most creative in. The mode that we're most creative in is where we expose ourselves to lots of different inspirations, which could be, from our interests, or from things we observe in like other companies or other industries or whatever, and we let those connections connect back to our own work. And if you're working super hard, you become resentful of time thinking about work outside of work, but that's the source of like so many creative insights, that you need to like be not working so hard in a focused way that you're resentful of letting your mind drift to work at other times, right? So you really need to I'm very against the idea that people should not think about work outside of work. So I think that thinking about work outside of work is when a lot of creativity happens. But if you're overworked, people become really resistant to doing that. The other thing I would say, so just infuse your life with creativity in a bunch of different ways, totally unrelated to the type of work that you would do. The other thing that you can do is like read some stuff on creativity. So read, there's a book called Creative Confidence that I've enjoyed. So that's something, and there's also another book called Wired to Create, which is a good one. The Creative Confidence one is more kind of practical. The Wired to Create one's more theoretical. But really prioritizing creativity, but not like as an add-on, not like I have to do all of this focusing and be creative. Like make the creativity like as much as equal importance to the other stuff. I also think that sometimes when people are really stressed, they shrink down their interests, and having diverse interests is actually like where you get diverse ideas from. So it might also be worth thinking about like exploring some more interests, whether that's like looking up YouTube videos on subjects that you're curious about, or different time periods or different industries, or reading about business innovation and different innovation of any kind in different industries can really spark you for your own industry. But as I said, you can't do that as an on top. Like if my 4-year-old's waving at me, if the most important role is that you have in your job is creativity, then you really need to make that like the thing that you're doing, not an extra. And don't cut back on your interests. Like don't react to stress by making your life smaller. One of the things that can be a really good stress reliever is to have something that you're pursuing. So for example, I'm pursuing improving my running at this, and I've done this before, right? So I've done like the Couch to 5K program maybe like about 4 times before, and I don't ever become a runner. It seems I seem to like get an injury or whatever, and I get to the end of the program and stop. But while I'm doing it, that's very stress relieving, right? It's stress relieving to have a goal that's completely outside of work. So it doesn't matter what's happening in the day, I've still got this something that's within my control, that's a goal that I'm pursuing for myself, and something kind of achievable. Like I can see, like in the 9 weeks of the program or whatever, I know I'm going to get to being able to run at a certain level. And when I say I've done it about 4 times, like I've probably done it about 4 times. I probably do it like once every 2 years or something like that. So yeah, some sort of personal project as well can be useful for sparking your creativity, but your tendency will be to want to shrink down and go into survival mode when you're really struggling with stress, and when you're like that, it can be difficult to have any sparks. Like you need interests to, and it doesn't have to be hobbies. It literally can be like just like watching videos about topics that you're interested in, or reading books about the topics that you're interested in. You just need diverse sparks, and so don't shrink down and go into survival mode. The other thing I would say is that you're sort of saying about overthinking and hesitating, and what I said about needing to have thought, needing to be okay with your thoughts drifting off to work topics while you're off the clock, while you're on the clock, but like walking around the block or whatever it might be, is that if you up your skills for handling rumination, so rumination being kind of really negative dwelling, and overthinking, if you up your skills for dealing with that, it will make it easier for you to allow yourself to go into that those deep thinking modes without it turning into rumination. There's a bunch of rumination stuff. If you go to search Oprah.com and Alice Boys, there's some strategies for dealing with rumination there that come from my earlier book, The Anxiety Toolkit. But yeah, any strategies that you use to be able to, that you learn to be able to handle really negatively toned overthinking, will allow you to do more, or to tolerate more creative overthinking. Okay, so those things are, so creative overthinking is really, can be really important, and creative thinking that happens in that where your mind is drifting off, right? So that is quite similar to rumination, but the more skills that you have for handling rumination, the more you can turn that those tendencies for your, so instead of your mind going into rumination, your mind will go into more productive problem solving and more creativity when your mind is having those downtime periods. All right, so I think that is it for now. Long-winded answers as usual, but yeah, these questions are complex questions, right? And so I want to give people a bunch of different potential routes to take with it. Partly because I think that that I could give, let's say I give 3 or 4 different tips or approaches for handling it. It might just be the one that sort of resonates with the person that asked the question, or whoever's got the same problem that might be listening to this. So you don't have to do it all, just pick what resonates for you out of what I say. And if I just give one answer, there's a decent chance that is not going to resonate with whoever needs that information in the question asker. So definitely take that approach. This is not none of the answers are you have to do all these things. You could do all of these things answers, and what the approach that suits you can vary. Like it can be one approach this week and different approach next week, and that's what I do. I like to mix it up. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for listening again, viewing, whatever. And yeah, again, I hope everyone in the US had a happy Thanksgiving, and I shall see you again in the next one.